Everyone thinks peace is a permanent thing, until the knock comes. For me, it wasn't even a knock. It was a pounding. The kind that shakes the trees, rattles your chest, and tells you that whatever comes next won't be good. I can still hear it echoing through the mountains that morning. But before the storm, there was silence. The kind my grandfather always spoke about. He used to say this land had a heartbeat. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel if you're patient enough. To sit still. He built the cabin here with his bare hands, timber by timber, dragging each log down from the ridge. He left it to me with a single instruction. Never let anyone make you feel small on your own patch of earth. That was a promise I intended to keep. That Saturday, the heartbeat was strong. The pines swayed, the lake gleamed like polished glass, and the smell of bacon on the stove mixed with the wet earth from last night's rain. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching morning light thread through the trees. For once, the world felt right, but peace is fragile, like glass. And all it takes is one stone. At 10:17 a.m., the first stone hit. The sound wasn't gentle, it wasn't polite. It was a demand, wrapped in flesh and bone, pounding on the iron gate I had welded myself. A gate that wasn't just steel, it was a statement. My statement. I set the mug down, sighing. The bacon would have to wait. In my study, I glanced at the monitors. 4 cameras feeding me every angle of the property. On screen. A familiar silver SUV. Karen's. Of course it was. Mitch, her bulldog of a husband, was already rapping his knuckles against the bars like he owned them. Each clang rolled through the trees like a warning bell, and there she was. Clipboard. In hand, lips curved into that patronizing half-smile that told me she wasn't here to ask. She was here to take. "Is the side keypad still functional?" she asked sweetly, like she was inquiring about hotel amenities. I thumbed my phone, making the cameras chirp a sharp test tone. Half the crowd behind her flinched. "Functional. Enough," I said. And then I noticed it, the crowd. At first just a handful, but more arriving by the minute. Neighbors, strangers, some dressed in sundresses and boat shoes, as if my gate were the velvet rope to their private little country club. Mitch grabbed the bars, giving them a shake, testing the welds. "Just open the gate, pal." 1/4 inch. "Spring steel," I said evenly. "You'll sprain your wrist before it flexes." Karen raised her clipboard like a conductor's baton. "Daniel, nobody's trying to take anything. This is community cooperation. We're having the annual retreat today. A lovely catered affair. 100 guests. I sent you the reservation notice last week." Her words hit like cold water. 100 guests. A reservation. At my cabin. On my land. The sheer audacity. Almost made me laugh. "You don't have my email," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not in your HOA. You've never served me notice. And this land," I let my hand rest on the cold iron, "was never your community center." Behind her, 2 vans were already unloading. Food trays, coolers, folding chairs. The invasion force was assembling. Karen tilted her head, voice dipped in syrup but sharpened like glass. "Daniel, you're confused about the bylaws. We have the proper documentation." She waved a paper with a bold seal, letting it flutter. Like a flag, I recognized the trick immediately. Official looking, but wrong. The stamp was off. The code was fake. Paper lies as easily as people. And I wasn't the kind of man who folded just because someone waved authority in my face. I stepped forward, hand on the iron handle. For a heartbeat, a flicker of triumph. Crossed her face, she thought I was opening it. Instead, I pulled it shut, the clang ringing like final judgment. Then the lock. 1 thud. Then the second, a salvaged bank vault deadbolt. Louder. Heavier. I looked at her through the bars, voice low and steady. My property is not reserved. It is occupied. By me. Have a nice day." The words hung there, sharp as a blade. The crowd shifted, murmuring, phones lifting to record, the story already spinning beyond my control, but I knew this wasn't the end. Karen's eyes burned, Mitch's jaw flexed, and deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I felt the truth pressing in. A locked gate wasn't going to be enough. Phones were already up, little black eyes staring, recording, waiting for a scene. And Karen, she lived for a stage. She pivoted toward the growing crowd, her voice smooth and theatrical, as if she'd been preparing for this performance all week. "It seems Mr. Ward is confused about the community property bylaws," she announced, clipboard raised like scripture. "Not to worry, we have documentation." A murmur rolled through the polo shirts and sundresses. She held up her prize, a stamped county permit. From 10 feet away, it looked real enough to fool most people. And that was her game. Not truth, not rights, appearance, authority in the shape of a seal. But I knew better. Paper can lie, stamps can be forged. And a woman like Karen, she thrived. On bluffing, betting you wouldn't have the strength to call it. I left her voice behind and walked back to the cabin. The murmurs followed me like a shadow. In my study, the safe was waiting, my grandfather's watch, old photographs, and the one document that mattered more than any of her theatrics, the deed. Edges worn, ink faded, but alive with truth. Alongside it, the county survey map and the amendment from 2020, clear, irrefutable proof that this land, Parcel 7B, had been carved away from their HOA's grasp forever. When I returned, the crowd had doubled. Vans blocked the narrow road, and people spilled onto the gravel, voices sharp with impatience. Neighbor Joey had shown up too, straddling his bike, looking like a kid caught in a food fight he wanted no part of. Karen's husband, Mitch, was pacing. Jaw tight, hands clenching and unclenching like a man looking for something to break. I ignored them all and turned toward camera 2, the clearest angle. I held the deed high so the lens could see. Then I faced the human audience. "This," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to cut through the chatter, "is a deed, signed in ink older than some of you standing here. And this," I pointed to the bold line from the amendment I'd taped to it. The words printed so large even the phones could read them. "This is county law, Parcel 7B, exempt from Black Lake HOA covenants. Your party is canceled." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was charged. Someone muttered, "Wait, wasn't this public once?" Another teenager scoffed, "Sovereign citizen, huh?" "No," I answered without flinching. "Boring citizen, the kind clerks love." Karen snapped her fingers, signaling to a man in a polo shirt like he was her foot soldier. "Call Carl at county events. Tell him Ward's obstructing." But before he could even dial, I recited my parcel number and amendment code from memory, every syllable sharp and exact. It stopped him cold. He lowered the phone, muttering, "He knows the numbers." Karen laughed, brittle and sharp. "That's an old document, Daniel. Things change. We have a valid permit for today." And that's when headlights crested the hill. A patrol car, silent, deliberate, cutting through the crowd of restless partygoers. Relief and dread tangled in my chest. Deputy Cole stepped out. Young by the book, steady. Exactly the kind of man I had hoped would answer. He didn't take sides, he didn't smile. He just scanned the scene with calm authority. "What's the situation here?" Karen pounced. "Thank goodness you're here, Deputy. This man is illegally blocking access to a designated community recreation area. We have a permit." She shoved the paper into his hand like she was placing a crown on his head. Cole's eyes scanned the page. I watched closely. I saw it, the twitch of his brow, the subtle shift in his posture. The seal was wrong, the QR code nonsense, the signature fake. He caught it. "Sir?" he asked, finally looking at me. "Your side of the story?" I stepped forward, holding out my deed and amendment. This is private property, deputy, not part of the HOA, never was. That permit is a fantasy. He compared them, eyes sharp. Then he pulled his radio. Dispatch, this is Cole. Run parcel 7B. Confirm ownership, status relative to Black Lake HOA, and check for any active event permits for this address. The radios crackled. Everyone froze. Karen's smile stayed pasted on, but her eyes betrayed the panic swelling underneath. Seconds stretched long. Then the voice came through, clear as a bell. Dispatch to Cole. Parcel 7B registered to Daniel Ward. Property confirmed exempt from Black Lake HOA jurisdiction as of October 2020 amendment. No event permits on file. The crowd shifted. The phones wavered. The tide turned. Cole handed Karen's paper back. His voice carried like iron. This document is not valid, ma'am. He lifted it higher, red pen scrawling void across the page. Permit void. A few people laughed. Someone muttered, "You dragged us out here for this?" And just like that, the foundation of her authority cracked. Karen's posture sagged for a heartbeat before indignation stitched her back together. This is ridiculous. The clerk must have made a mistake. Cole didn't even blink. Recorder confirmed twice. No mistake. HOA has no authority here. I suggest you disperse. Clear the road for emergency access. The crowd started peeling. Away, muttering, grumbling. Their phones now aimed at her instead of me. Neighbor Joey shook his head, pedaled away. The party was over. But as I caught Mitch's eyes through the iron bars, I felt the weight of something darker. His jaw clenched, his fists trembled, and his stare drilled into me like stone. The retreat was canceled. But the fight? The fight was only just beginning. Silence can be louder than shouting. After the deputy voided her permit, the noise drained out of the crowd like air from a balloon. People shuffled back toward their cars, whispering, filming, already rewriting their Saturday plans. But Mitch didn't move. He stayed planted in front of my gate, jaw flexing, eyes hard as flint. His face was flushed, a man simmering on the edge of something he couldn't control. Cole was busy directing traffic, waving vans around, clearing the bottleneck. That left just me, the iron bars, and Mitch's boiling rage. He leaned closer, voice low, gravelly. This isn't over, pal. You embarrassed my wife. I gave a small shrug, though my pulse was hammering. Your wife embarrassed herself. She forged a permit and tried to take my land for a party. I just pointed out the facts. The moment the word left my mouth, I knew it was the wrong one. Facts. Mitch wasn't here for facts. He was here for dominance. He smirked, stepping to the side as if he were backing off. For a split second, I almost believed he was retreating. But then I heard my grandfather's voice in my head. Never throw the first punch, but always be ready for it. Mitch spun back fast. Too fast. His fist shot through the narrow gap between the bars, a sucker punch aimed at my jaw. I turned just enough, but his knuckles still caught me hard on the cheekbone. The sound was sickening. Flesh smacking flesh, metal ringing as his ring or watch scraped the bars. White light burst behind my eyes. My head snapped sideways. Pain bloomed hot and sharp across my face. I staggered a step back, hand flying to my cheek. My vision swam, but I didn't fall, and I didn't hit back. Instinct said swing. Pride screamed to answer. But resilience, the kind carved into me by years of solitude, held me steady, because I realized something even through the pain. He'd done it. On camera. Camera 2 had the perfect view. Camera 1 caught the angle. My phone propped on the porch picked up the audio. 3 separate records, plus Cole's body cam once he turned around at the sound of the blow. Mitch had just committed assault on my property with a deputy steps away. The dumbest, most self-destructive move he could have made. Cole spun at the clang, eyes widening as he took in the scene, me holding my cheek, Mitch shaking out his hand with a smug, feral grin. That's it, Cole said, voice stripped of patience. "You're done." The deputy moved fast, grabbing Mitch's arm, twisting it behind his back, slamming him against the iron bars he'd just punched through. Mitch grunted, twisting, shouting, "What the hell? He provoked me!" The excuse was pathetic. Everyone. There knew it. "Hands behind your back. Now." Cole's tone was steel. He cuffed Mitch with practiced efficiency, the click of metal snapping through the stillness like a verdict. Karen shrieked, high and desperate. "You can't do that! He was just defending my honor!" Cole ignored her. His voice rolled like iron as he read Mitch his rights. Every word dropped like a hammer on the coffin of their little kingdom. Phones filmed every second. Some people smirked, whispering. A few even laughed. The party they came for had turned into something darker, something they couldn't look away from. As Cole walked Mitch toward the cruiser, Karen hustled after, heels stabbing gravel. "Deputy, I'll be filing a formal complaint." "Ma'am," he said without turning, "you're free to file anything you want, as long as you don't step in front of my car." She froze mid-stride, face red with rage. Beside me, one woman, who'd wandered too close, offered a casserole dish, her hands trembling. "Spinach artichoke dip?" I touched the swelling on my cheek, blood slick on my fingertips. "Maybe not today." She scurried away. Cole opened the cruiser door, guiding Mitch in none too gently. "This isn't over," Mitch spat at me, voice low and venomous. "It is for today," Cole answered, shutting the door with a decisive thunk. Neighbor Joey, still, straddling his bike, raised a hand in half-hearted solidarity. "For what it's worth," he said, "I was team potato salad, but after the punch, I'm switching sides." Despite the pain burning across my face, I managed the smallest nod. "Small victories," Cole returned, eyes professional but softening just slightly as he looked at me. "Sir, are you all right? Need me to call an ambulance?" My cheek throbbed, each heartbeat a pulsing reminder of the violation. "I'll live," I muttered. Then I steadied myself, voice clearer. "It's all on video, Deputy. Every second." His expression hardened again. "I have no doubt. My body cam was rolling too. Do you want to press charges for battery?" I looked past him at Karen's face, horrified, furious, powerless, as her husband sat cuffed in the back of a patrol car. I thought about my grandfather's words. Never let anyone make you feel small. This wasn't just a punch. It was a line, crossed in every way possible. "Yes," I said, my voice cold as stone. "Absolutely." Cole gave me a card with the case number. I took it, my fingers trembling only slightly, and tucked it into my pocket. That night, I would upload every frame of footage, back it up twice, file the statement, log the evidence. Because Mitch's fist wasn't the end. It was the escalation. The next step in a fight I never asked for, but one I was now fully committed to finish. And deep down, under the pain and the anger, I knew something else. Karen had lost her party. Mitch had lost his temper. But I was about to show them what it meant to lose on every front. The flashing lights painted the trees red and blue, a surreal glow that turned the mountain quiet into something tense and fragile. The ambulance pulled up slow, siren off, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The last partygoers lingered, at the edge of the road, whispering, filming, trying to make sense of how their Saturday had turned into a police report. Karen stood stiff, her arms crossed tight, fury simmering under a thin shell of composure. But the cameras weren't pointed at me anymore. They were on her, the HOA president whose big retreat had collapsed into handcuffs and blood. 2 EMTs moved through the side gate after Cole keyed them in. Professional, efficient. They didn't ask questions about HOA bylaws or forged permits. They looked straight at me, at my swelling cheek, the blood on my shirt. Their flashlights felt harsh against my skin. "Concussion?" one asked. "No," I muttered. My head was pounding, but the world wasn't spinning. Just throbbing. He probed gently, fingers cold against the fire blooming across my face. Contusion. No fracture. Painful, but it'll heal, they offered. To take me to the hospital, but I shook my head. I know someone better. As they packed up, headlights swung across the gravel. A familiar car pulled into the driveway next door. Rose, my neighbor, nurse at the local clinic. She stepped out, saw the patrol car, the ambulance, my face, and her whole demeanor changed. The weekend softness dropped, replaced by the calm authority of someone who's seen worse and knows exactly what to do. "Daniel," she said, crossing the distance quickly. "What on earth happened?" I tried to smile, though it pulled at the bruised skin. HOA meeting got a little out of hand. The EMTs handed her the clipboard, their assessment brief. She nodded, eyes scanning me with quiet precision. Then she turned to them. "I'll take it from here." They seemed relieved, giving her the space, trusting her word. Inside the cabin, she guided me to the kitchen like it was her own. "Sit." Her voice left no room for argument. She found an ice pack, wrapped it properly, and placed it against my cheek with hands that were steady and gentle all at once. "A sucker punch," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Through the gate, wasn't it?" I nodded. "You saw?" From my window, I saw the cuffs too. She sat across from me, her brow furrowed, eyes sharp. "You need to document this, Daniel, properly. Not just for the police, for what's coming next. These people don't stop, they escalate." I stared at her for a long moment. Her words weren't dramatic. They were simply true. And it was strange, comforting even, to hear them from someone else. Someone who understood the rhythm of conflict, who wasn't shocked that neighbors could turn into adversaries overnight. Deputy Cole said the same thing, I admitted. Gave me paperwork for a restraining order. Her eyes hardened, a protective fire in them I hadn't noticed before. "Good. You're going to fill it out tonight. Tomorrow you'll come to my clinic. I'll take official photographs, write up a medical report. It'll stand in court. No wiggle room." I couldn't help but feel a flicker of gratitude, unexpected and sharp. My grandfather had built this place to be a fortress of solitude. But tonight, sitting here with Rose at my table, I realized solitude had its limits. Even fortresses are stronger with allies. We spent the next hour like that. She held the ice pack to my face while I filled out the paperwork with my unbruised hand. The language was dry, legalistic, but the story it told was clear. A violent man had assaulted me on my property, unprovoked in front of witnesses. "Adie." "The threats he made before the punch," Rose said, leaning over the form. "Shows intent, shows premeditation." I did. Her attention to detail matched my own, methodical, relentless. At one point, she even called a friend, a paralegal, to confirm the filing procedure. It wasn't just medical care she was giving me, it was strategy. And in the middle of it all, as she fussed with the ice pack or scribbled notes, I caught myself watching her, the way her brow furrowed with focus, the quiet fire in her voice when she said these people don't stop. For the first time since the morning's peace had shattered, I felt something else besides anger. I felt less alone. When she finally rose to leave, she paused at the door, her hand on the frame. "For a man who built a giant iron gate to keep the world out, you're not very good at it." I managed a crooked smile. "I built it to keep trouble out. I just underestimated trouble's determination to get in." Her lips curved into a real smile, soft, but knowing. "Get some rest. Call me if it gets worse." When the door closed, behind her, the cabin was quiet again. Too quiet. I looked at the restraining order paperwork on the table, her neat handwriting pointing out clauses I'd almost missed. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a shield, a first volley in a war. I hadn't chosen, but one I was now ready to fight. Sleep never came. Midnight found me in the study, the glow of the monitors painting my face. The woods outside lay in ghostly silence, the cameras catching every movement. For a while, it seemed calm, safe, until headlights appeared on camera 4. A box truck, large, slow. Its lights dimmed. It rolled to a stop in the exact spot Karen's SUV had occupied that morning, and just like that, the piece shattered again. The truck's engine cut off, leaving only the ticking of cooling metal. Two figures slipped from the cab, moving with the kind of practiced quiet that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Not kids, not neighbors, professionals. They rolled the back door open and I saw it. Tables, chairs, heaters, even decorative planters. A catering crew. Under cover of night, they started unloading piece by piece, working with efficiency that told me this wasn't the first time they'd set up an event. Only this time, their event was at my gate. I watched from the monitor, jaw tight, anger hard and cold in my stomach. They weren't stepping onto my land. No. They were cleverer than that. Every chair, every canopy leg, every box of supplies, they placed it on the public right-of-way just beyond my survey stakes. Technically not trespassing, technically not mine, but close enough to feel like an invasion. By the time they finished, a pristine white canopy stood on the shoulder of the road, rows of folding chairs lined like soldiers, heaters glowing faint orange in the dark. A ghostly event space, facing my lakefront like it belonged to them. They packed up, doors rolling shut, and drove away, leaving the setup standing in the moonlight, silent, mocking. I pulled on boots and walked to the line, careful to keep my feet on my side of the stakes. The plastic still reeked of factory vinyl. One of the heaters had been zip-tied to a young sapling, bending it cruelly. A coyote padded out of the trees, sniffed at a planter, and trotted away with more dignity than any of them. I could have slashed the straps, could have dragged the chairs into a heap. My hands itched for it. But my grandfather's voice came back again. Never swing first. So instead, I pulled my phone. I walked slow, deliberate, recording everything. Each chair, each canopy leg, the timestamp glowing on the screen. I read it all aloud as I filmed. Landmarks, positions, even the license plate I'd already memorized. I wasn't just watching their setup. I was building my case. When I finished, I stood very still, letting the quiet close in around me. Above, an owl dropped like a shadow, catching something small and squeaking before vanishing back into the dark. Nature moved on. But I stayed rooted, staring at the white canopy glowing like a wedding tent in a cemetery. "See you in the morning," I muttered, and turned back toward the cabin. Inside, I made 3 copies of the video. One raw, one time-stamped, one backed up to a separate drive. Then I picked up the phone. Not 911. This wasn't an emergency. Not yet. This was legal, calculated. "I called the sheriff's non-emergency line," the dispatcher answered, voice thick with fatigue. "Sheriff's Department, what's your issue?" I explained everything, referencing Deputy Cole's earlier report. The box truck, the catering crew, the illegal setup on the county right-of-way. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Dumping, you say? Commercial?" "That's correct," I said evenly. "Canopy, about 50 chairs, portable heaters, abandoned overnight on a public easement." Her tone shifted. Illegal dumping wasn't just frowned on out here. It was a hot-button issue, and commercial dumping came with fines steep enough to cripple a small business. "Okay, sir," she said, more alert now. "We'll send a unit." An hour later, headlights again. Another deputy. Not Cole this time, but a man with tired eyes, and the gait of someone who's seen it all before. I met him at the gate and showed him the footage, the timestamps, the license plate. He walked the perimeter of the setup, shaking his head, a faint whistle escaping his lips. "Well, I'll be. That's brazen." He confirmed it over the radio. The road was public, and the equipment obstructed the lane below minimum width. Illegal dumping, obstruction of a public thoroughfare, both citable, both expensive. I watched as he wrote the tickets, affixing them to the canopy pole in a plastic sleeve. 2 slips of paper that would cost someone thousands. Registered owner of that catering company is going to have a bad morning, he muttered, handing me the incident number. I snapped photos of the citations, scanned the tow inventory sheet, and logged everything into my files. Gate plus dumping. Another entry in what was quickly becoming a war ledger. They'll impound all this by sunrise, the deputy added. Charge the owner for removal and storage. Caterer will name who hired them. My bet? HOA, not you. I nodded, once, calm on the outside. But inside? Satisfaction burned slow and steady. Karen thought she was being clever, but clever doesn't beat methodical. When the deputy drove off, I stood a long time staring at the white canopy under the moonlight, now fluttering with bright plastic tickets. What she meant as a show of power had just become evidence of her weakness. She wanted me to wake up to a party on my doorstep. Instead, she'd wake up to tow trucks dismantling her empire piece by piece, and I'd be watching from the porch with coffee in hand. Dawn broke with the low rumble of diesel engines. From my porch, coffee steaming in my hand, I watched the county flatbed and a crew of public works men roll up to the ghostly canopy. They didn't bother with questions, no speeches, no hesitation. Just gloves on, straps unbuckled, metal clanking as they dismantled every piece of Karen's midnight theater. The canopy folded, the chairs stacked, the heaters loaded. Less than an hour later, the roadside was bare again, except for the tire tracks pressed deep into the soil and the faint smell of vinyl in the morning air. What she'd tried to make permanent was erased before the first guest could even arrive. There was something deeply satisfying about it. Not loud satisfaction, not gloating. Just quiet, steady victory. Winning not with shouts, but with paperwork and patience. After the trucks rolled away, I drove into town. The courthouse was a squat brick building that smelled faintly of dust and old ink. Filing the temporary restraining order against Mitch was quick, procedural. I signed the papers, handed them over, and left with a stamped copy that felt heavier than it should. Then I went straight to Rose's clinic. She'd promised me more than sympathy, and she delivered. In a brightly lit room, she took photographs, from every angle. The swelling, the bruise already turning purple and blue, the small cut near my cheekbone. Each picture precise, clinical. This isn't about pity, she said as the shutter clicked. It's about evidence. Her medical report was cold, factual. Words like contusion, localized swelling, projected healing time. But those words carried weight. Together with the photos, they became a record no one could argue with. I thanked her, though the words felt too small. She just gave me a look. Half nurse, half neighbor, and something else I couldn't quite name. Daniel, you can't just react. You have to build your defense. Make it airtight. Back home, I knew exactly where to start. For years, I'd kept a binder in my study, a thick, heavy thing labeled HOA nonsense. Inside was every misdelivered notice, every violation warning meant for other properties, every flyer for events I wasn't part of. I'd never thrown them away. My grandfather had been a lawyer before he was a carpenter, and he'd taught me the first rule of survival. The person with the best records usually wins. So I spread it all out across the table. Pages and pages of HOA mistakes. Half of them laughable. But I wasn't looking for jokes. I was looking for patterns. 2 hours passed before I found it. A yellowed newsletter from 3 years back. At the time, I'd skimmed it and tucked it away, but now a single sentence leapt off the page. We remind all residents that the ward parcel, number 7B, is the site of the former lake access point, which was decommissioned and sold in 2020. This is now private property and should be respected as such. It was right there, in their own words, in their own official newsletter, printed when Karen was already sitting on the board. She couldn't claim ignorance. She had known all along that my land wasn't theirs, And still she had forged, lied, pushed, and bullied. I slipped the newsletter into a protective sleeve, my hands steady, my pulse not. Because this wasn't just trespass anymore, this was fraud. Calculated, deliberate fraud. Piece by piece, I began building a new binder. Slimmer, sharper. I labeled it in thick black marker. Gerwig. Inside went the deed. The county amendment. Rose's photographs. The restraining order paperwork. Screenshots from the security footage. Mitch's fist arcing through the bars. The arrest, the citations taped to Karen's canopy. And now, the smoking gun. The HOA's own newsletter acknowledging my property was private. Every page was an exhibit. Every exhibit told the same story. Karen's power was a fiction, and I had the proof to dismantle it. I sat back looking at the binder. It wasn't for me. Not really. It was for them. For the board. For the courts. For anyone who still believed. Karen's voice was stronger than the truth. For the first time since the banging on my gate, I felt something close to calm, because this wasn't just defense anymore. This was preparation. Karen had tried to humiliate me with a fake permit, a crowd, and a party. Mitch had tried to intimidate me with his fists. They both thought noise was power. But the truth? The truth was heavier. And once you put it in writing, once you lock it in a binder and back it with evidence, it becomes immovable. The gate was my shield, the binder was becoming my sword, and I was ready to use it. The binder sat on my desk like a weapon waiting to be drawn, but even the sharpest blade needs the right moment, the right strike. I thought I had enough. And then fate, or maybe guilt, handed me more than I could have hoped for. It came as an email. No name, no signature, just a scrambled sender address and a single subject line. Black Lake HOA. Inside, only one sentence. Check the board meeting minutes from February 2020. She was there. My pulse kicked. I clicked the link and scrolled through the dry language of motions and approvals until the line hit me like a hammer. Motion to formally recognize the county's sale of the former lake access, Parcel 7B, to the Ward family. Board members present. But Gerwig, secretary. She hadn't just known. She had typed the minutes herself. Karen, the woman who'd stood at my gate with a forged permit, had once written in her own words that my property was private. But the anonymous whistleblower wasn't. Finished. Hours later, a second email came, this one with attachments. A chain of correspondence between Karen and the HOA's own attorney, dated just 3 weeks before the retreat. Her message was blunt. I'm planning the summer retreat at the old lake access point. I know there was paperwork filed years back, but I intend to proceed. It's for the good of the community. The lawyer's reply was sharper than any blade. Karen, I strongly advise against this. The ward parcel is private property. The HOA has no jurisdiction. Proceeding will expose the HOA board to severe legal and financial liability. Do not do this. And Karen's chilling response, thank you for your legal opinion. I will take it under advisement. She had been warned, explicitly, in writing, and still she had marched to my gate with 100 guests and a forged permit. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen. My anger wasn't hot anymore. It was cold, deliberate, because this wasn't just arrogance. This was betrayal of the very people she claimed to lead. My attorney, Ms. Patel, nearly laughed when I forwarded her the chain. Daniel, she said, her voice crackling with restrained satisfaction. This isn't just evidence. This is a lever, and now we're going to use it. She drafted a demand letter, not addressed to Karen, but to the entire board. It laid out every fact in a calm, chronological march, each point backed by an exhibit. The deed, the amendment, the newsletter, the assault, the restraining order, the citations, the emails. Exhibit after exhibit, a mountain of truth no one could climb. And then the closing paragraph, a threat as sharp as a guillotine. Unless Karen was removed immediately and damages rectified, we would file suit not just against the HOA, but against each board member individually for negligence. It was mailed certified, emailed too, and it was a stone dropped into a stagnant pond. The ripples came fast. Within 24 hours, Dana, the new board secretary, called Patel. "They're panicking," she whispered. "Karen's furious. She says the emails are fake. But the others, they're scared. They didn't sign up for this." An emergency session was called. Patel told me to stay home. "Let them eat their own," she said. "You've already done your part." So I sat on the porch that night, watching the moon rise over the lake while, a mile away, the board gathered in their clubhouse. I imagined the folding chairs, the coffee urn, the tension so thick you could cut it. The next morning, Dana sent Patel a report, and it read like a play in collapse. Karen tried to control the room at first, pounding her gavel, insisting it was just a misunderstanding. But the vice president cut her down with one line. "The moment you ignored counsel, it became negligence." The treasurer, an accountant quiet until now, slid a copy of the demand letter across the table. His voice shook with anger. "Karen, did our lawyer tell you not to do this?" Karen tried to dodge, to smile, to talk about community spirit. But the question hung in the air like a noose. Finally, she cracked. Yes, she had been warned, but she claimed it was for the good of the community. And that was the end. The moment she admitted it, she lost them. The board turned, shouting, accusations, panic. A man in the back said his wife had told him not to come, that Karen would get them all sued over a picnic. Neighbor Joey gave a shaky recount of the gate showdown, muttering, "Deputy said it was void right in front of everybody." It was the death blow, the Queen's crown slipping off before her subjects. By night's end, the vote was 4-1. Karen stripped of authority, Mitch banned from all community spaces, and the board agreeing to every one of Patel's demands. Karen, who had begun the week as the unshakable president, walked out of that meeting a pariah, dethroned not by shouts, but by her own words, her own arrogance, her own refusal to see that the truth, once written down, carries more weight than any clipboard. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. The courier arrived a week later, a thick envelope in hand. Inside was the final surrender, signed, notarized, recorded with the county. A non-interference covenant, binding forever. The Black Lake HOA relinquished all claims to my property, present or imagined, for as long as ink can hold on paper. Alongside it was a reimbursement check. Legal fees, filing costs, even Rose's clinic bill. Not much money, but the principle was priceless. For once, the HOA was paying for the consequences of its own arrogance. I held the document in my hand, and for the first time since the pounding on my gate, I exhaled. A long, heavy release I hadn't realized I'd been holding, but closure didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened at the same place it had started, the Iron Gate. On a Saturday afternoon, almost a month to the day since Karen tried to turn my home into her clubhouse, a crowd gathered again. Not for a party this time, for a reckoning. Deputy Cole was there, standing solid as ever. He read out the terms of the permanent restraining order, reminding Mitch that he was barred from coming within 100 yards of me or my land. Mitch stood sullen, his jaw tight, his pride in tatters. Karen was beside him, but she wasn't the woman with the clipboard anymore. No condescending smile, no false authority, just a small, diminished figure, her eyes fixed anywhere but on me. I stepped forward, carrying something I'd prepared with Patel's blessing. A laminated copy of the deed, numbers redacted, but my grandfather's signature clear as day. I affixed it to the inside of the gate, right where anyone approaching would see. Then I read aloud the line from the 2020 amendment, the one that freed Parcel 7B forever from HOA covenants. My voice carried steady through the still afternoon air. When I finished, silence hung heavy. Cole broke it, his words echoing like they had on that first day. The permit is void. HOA has no authority here. Matter settled. A few neighbors clapped, awkward but real. Others shuffled away, murmuring, finally understanding where the line stood. Karen and Mitch turned without a word. They walked back to their car, smaller than I had ever seen them, swallowed by the very silence they had once tried to break. They didn't look back. It was over. The week that followed was the quietest I'd known in years. Quiet that was earned, not borrowed. I sat on the porch with Rose, coffee mugs warm in our hands, watching the lake stretch calm and glassy under the morning light. The iron gate stood closed, my grandfather's deed shining in the sun like a shield. Think they learned? She asked, nodding toward the gate. Karen? I shook my head. No, but the board did. The neighbors did. She smiled softly. Boundaries matter. Yeah, they do. I thought of my grandfather, of the stones he set and the trees he planted, of the words he left me with. Never let anyone make you feel small on your own patch of earth. I looked at the land, the pines swaying, the rocks warming in the sun, the hum of the earth steady beneath my boots, and I knew the answer now. How far would I go? As far as I had to, with every tool I had, iron, cameras, paper, law, with stubborn patience, not fists, with quiet strength, not noise. Never swing first, but always, always make sure the last blow lands, even if it's just a stack of documents. I took another sip of coffee. The bruise on my cheek healed now, but Rose's photographs keeping the truth sharp. She set her hand gently on my arm. I didn't pull away. The gate stayed shut. The cameras watched. The land hummed on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Peace. You've heard this confession. Now wait until you hear the next one.